St. James, if we just look at the obvious from a facility standpoint, from a location standpoint, it stands out immediately. Basketball was just something that, I always knew I wanted to do and play, but the ball does stop bouncing. For me, it was injury driven. So, there's parenting and then there's coaching. Sometimes people get that confused. I've learned in early years that how to help a young man or a young lady that might not have the size and speed, but they have the IQ. Everybody wants NIL, collective money, whatever the case may be. So they want to stay in school, which I think is a great thing. And it's the new day G League if you look at it, because college athletes are professional athletes the moment they get paid.
So you think like somebody had this in order from the beginning?
Make the style go a certain way, but then how I just, at the end of the day, people still got their own coaching styles, right?
Welcome to Game Related, where we highlight opportunities and obstacles from former athletes with the thought process of giving future generations a better understanding about the game. These conversations are meant to bring awareness to the hardships and the opportunities that come from the game. Let's get Game Related. All right, y'all, we are back with another episode of Game Related. We are in St. James at the headquarters. We are with Walt Webb, who is running the high school basketball program here. Very excited to talk to him about the new beginnings here. Obviously, we got the EYBL Scholastic. We're going to talk a little bit about that and just his expectations of the future of St. James, man. So welcome to the show.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, man, let's jump into, I guess, the mission or the core values of the basketball program of St. James.
Yeah, sure. Of course. One thing I do want to make sure that, obviously with all of the confusion in the game of basketball, I'll be doing the post-grad program and then player development from middle school on up. So Coach Book, legend in his own right, will be heading the high school, basketball program. And of course, I'll be assisting him with that. But as far as the core values, the St. James basketball program, our goal is to make sure, that all of our people and athletes have an opportunity to see what a professional mindset is every day, right? So there's the on the court, then there's also the off the court. And, in this environment with all of the benefits of, trainers, coaches, great teachers, we're going to make sure that they're held accountable in every category, offensively, defensively, game readiness, what college looks like. We're going to give them all the prerequisites that they'll need in order to get to the next level.
And I'm excited, man.
Yeah,
I'm definitely excited. So obviously, there was a big announcement, the EYBL Scholastic.
Sure.
Talk about why that's exciting for you.
Well, it's exciting for anyone, parents, kids, coaches, just to be in, one of the top, programs in the country with the EYBL Scholastic. EYBL in the summertime has made a name for itself, has a long lineage of just great athletes. I heard an interesting stat just the other day that 80+%, if you just look at all of the NBA players that are Americans that are playing in the NBA today, it's over 80%. So, when you look at those numbers, obviously, they've got something that works. And, obviously from a competition standpoint, not taking anything away from any other, organization, they just have a plethora of consistent talent that helps kids get ready for the highest level of basketball here in this country.
Okay. So a lot of people in the area kind of know who Walt Webb is, right? But for those who don't know, who is Walt Webb?
Walter Webb Jr. Is the son of Walt Webb Sr., who, was first Afro-American teacher, coach at Bishop McNamara, which I knew at birth where I would be going to high school.
I don't think you had a choice on that one.
I didn't. And, my mother and father were both coaches. So, I would be at one of the two. I would be either at my mom's practice. She was at Lorraine High School, and then she left Lorraine and was head coach full time at Lackey High School in Charles County. Yeah. And then my father was, obviously at Bishop McNamara, and from that, just conversations at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Just moving salt and pepper shakers, going through offensive sets. You know, my dad was, you know, just he was a mathematician, so everything was based on exact numbers, angles, just understanding, you know, how to simplify defenses and things of that nature. So at a very early age, I just got an opportunity to take advantage of his knowledge, just being a fly on the wall. But, you know, his nickname was Big Coach. I was given the nickname Little Coach. So all of my childhood friends to this day call me Little Coach. You know, and, you know, just growing up with that, I felt like, you know, I always knew a little bit more.
Yeah.
Not bragging or boasting on it, but, you know, in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, you know, I was in varsity practices, whereas, you know, some kids were just picking up a basketball for the first time. So I just had, you know, a different, you know, level of resource, you know, to the game and what things should look like. So, you know, from a player to you know, playing high school at Bishop McNamara, going to Virginia Union, leaving Virginia Union, and then playing at Ferrum College, having a short stint overseas to be able to go over there and play in China. You know, it just, you know, basketball was just something that, you know, I always knew I wanted to do and play, but the ball does stop bouncing. And for me, it was injury driven. So, you know, I couldn't get past the injuries. And, you know, I was in a situation where I was offered an opportunity to coach at Riverdale Baptist while I was working to get back in shape to go overseas. And I literally broke my ankle in two places, you know, in Riverdale's gym. And the athletic director offered me an opportunity to stay on and work with the youth. And, you know, I did that. And, you know, all of a sudden I began to see, you know, my passion shift. And I could see what my dad was seeing when he was coaching, you know, just a relationship with players, you know, building something from the beginning, you know, and just, you know, relaying and teaching and cultivating a culture that, you know, we could just leave a legacy behind, which I know my father had done at that time already. And that was, you know, we always want to be like our superhero. So, you know, I had an opportunity to do that. And I started coaching at Riverdale Baptist. And, you know, I think our first, you know, few games we actually had on tank tops. You know what I mean? Like, you know, magic marker numbers.
Budget was low.
Your budget was very, very low. You know, but, you know, then not that long being removed from, you know, playing. And I was still, you know, playing once I got back, you know, from the injury. But, you know, it put me in a situation where, you know, nothing was given, you know. And so being part of the being cut from the old school of things, you know, it's something that I kept with me because it's easy when you know how. And, you know, I learned how to win because we lost. And no one gave us anything. You know, 7-footers weren't walking around, you know, and if they weren't in our new startup program. But you know, Kamar Mentz's of the world, the Al Millers, the Derek Paynes, you know, just a lot of guys, Patrick Antanagana, Wayne Gibson, Kevin Bell, you know, just kids that, you know, Riverdale owes them a lot because, you know, with them we were able to get, you know, USA Today recognition. We were able to be ranked, you know, top 1 and 2, you know, in PG Journal. So, you know, just building that, then, you know, leaving there, going to coach on the post-grad side down in Virginia Beach, where we had a great run, 6 national championships. That turned into, you know, me having little Greg Harrison, who, you know, now after all of these years, just talking about player-coach relationship, having an opportunity to work with him, and, you know, being with Team Museum, he's doing a lot of what I had the energy to do then, you know, and he's giving back, you know, and leaving a lot of positive things behind. So, so yeah, just, being a post-grad coach, being from PG County, Upper Marlboro, a lot of people think I'm from Texas. They think I'm from Virginia Beach, and that's okay. I know where home is, and the kids in PG County are close and dear to me because everywhere that I've ever gone and everywhere that I've ever coached, there's always been a PG County kid or kids within my program because it's something special. There was a movie. I wasn't in it, but there was a movie, Something in the Water, and I love that movie because if you just look at the kids that have come up in the last 20, 30 years, in PG County, I don't know if there's anywhere else in the country where you can say it was that consistent. It was extremely jaw-dropping, just year to year to year to year, team to team to team to team, not just individuals, but teams that have left this area and region and represented well throughout the country. So, just wanting to have that as a coach and to represent PG County wherever I've gone, whether it be San Antonio, Texas, Virginia Beach, Fredericksburg, now Virginia and Northern Virginia, just a winning mindset, hard work. Nobody's going to give you anything. That's just who I am, and I tell young people all the time, it took me 50 plus years just to get to where I'm at. Right now we have.
You're in your 50s?
Yeah, I'm 54. So, you know what I mean? You got
good in your 50s, man.
Thank you. So you got a lot of young guys that are up and coming. I understand their ambition. I understand their goals. But nothing happens overnight. And everything that the wins, the losses, even going from post-grad, when my two boys, my twin boys were born, I took a step back, a sabbatical, and went into the grassroots because I wanted to prepare myself for them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's what my dad did for me and my brother. So, starting all over and then, being here at this point back at the St. James, there's just a different level of appreciation because, not often do you get this opportunity and or if not level of appreciation for, what you've been a part of. But, this is be my, fourth program being at the beginning of it. And, I'm super excited about it because I think that this, is going to be the best program in the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: as a coach, what should players expect from you as a coach?
Just a lot of high energy. I have a job to do. I'm going to do my job. My job is to make them better. So, I'll apologize to them later. Because there's parenting and then there's coaching. Sometimes people get that confused. I've learned in early years that leave the parenting to the parents, but your walk in who you are and how you coach and coaching the heart, making sure that you understand each player because each kid is different. Mm-hmm. But you got to be able to push them and they got to know that it's not personal. I don't use profanity, so I don't call kids out of their name, right? I don't, disrespect, the kids that have been placed in my presence to be able to mentor, right? Motivate, inspire, and encourage, and I'm not, I don't have an opinion against people that use that, but being asked what should they expect from me, the highest level of respect. And I only want that in return. So I lead by what I say, and I just want kids to understand that I'm going to take them through a process. Mm-hmm. They're going to earn the right to play. They'll also be in a situation where, the accountability piece, they may go 8 minutes in practice and hear the whistle 20 times, right? So, for me, they can expect like being prepared game day. Okay. They can expect, what goes into winning, but they've got to match my intensity every day.
So practice probably gonna be harder than the game.
Oh, very much, and it should be. Yeah, and it should be. Okay. And in the event that games like last night, Knicks and and Indy. Everybody went to another level. If you look at the last 4 minutes, that's nothing that they probably, have seen for the first time. Like they've been in that situation in practice. Like it looked so orchestrated, and it was all based on skill. You let your training and your preparation, take over, and I think that's what happened last night.
Okay. So what would you expect from a player that wanted to play with this program?
Yeah, so, I would want a kid to be coachable, right? Also realistic. I would like for kids, in today's game not to compare themselves with any other player. They're all different. I use this analogy like, everybody wants to be Denzel.
Right.
There's only one Denzel, but without a cast, you don't have a movie. So what role are you playing? You want to be part of the picture, that's successful, and then everything else will take over when your time comes. Is basically what I'm trying to say. And if we can be in a situation where kids can follow instructions, compete against the margin of error, be consistently consistent, not consistently inconsistent, I think we'll go a long way, because this might be the only sport where kids 18 to 22 have the highest level of impact on whether or not a coach keeps their job. Okay, so I need kids that want to be coachable, not kids that are trying to coach the coach.
Parents that's trying to coach the coach.
Or parents that's trying to coach the coach. Well, at this level, right here, which is a major plus, being here at the St. James and programs like the St. James, in the EYBL Scholastic, is like parents have to take a back seat. Once they've enrolled, it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like coaches understand what they want, because it's been discussed. The parents understand what they're getting because it's been discussed. Now we're in a situation where we're going to communicate with parents, but we're not talking basketball with parents. That happened during recruitment. So, nothing's going to change. Coach Book, myself, and our staff, we're really going to stand by what we say, and what we ask the kids to do. So, there won't be any surprises.
Okay.
Roles may change, injuries may happen, illnesses, things of that nature. Tournament, it may be an adjustment to somebody else's roster. We might need to make a change, but it'll be for the purpose. And kids have to understand change, right? It's not going to be like where they came from. Yeah. Otherwise, they would have stayed. You know what I mean? Like you're walking into change when you come to an EYBL Scholastic program or a post-grad program or a program in an elite status. You want to put yourself in a situation where you're open to change, because if you can't change, then you're not going to be able to change when you go to college. So it's all part of the process. We just want to see kids that are willing to accept change.
Okay. So what would you say is your favorite part of this? Like, I've seen you on the court developing. I think you're really good at that, right?
Thank you.
And obviously, you have a coaching side of it with the X and O's. What would you say is your blend of it, or what's your favorite piece?
Yeah, I love it all, but I think I've grown to appreciate developing more, because the game of basketball, we'll put it this way, coaching is the easy part in the grand scheme of things, because I look at coaching as 2 + 2.
Okay.
It's 4. Always been 4, right? So coaching is coaching. They overplay, you cut back doors. So it's like certain things you just automatically know what to do. But when it gets into skill development, like that changes, right? Almost similar to the periodic table, like, the different aspects of the game. Kids are more athletic. They're doing things
right
a whole lot different. The speed in which they play, just the things that they're able to do. So, how to negate that, right? how to help a young man or young lady that might not have the size and speed, but they have the IQ, right? So we take their weaknesses and we turn them into strengths. Now they're a complete player. So, you know, I really get a lot of joy out of that because, you know, one of my biggest mantras is, you know, training the overlooked to compete against the overrated.
Ha.
You know, we've all been overlooked.
Say
right?
that one more time.
Training the overlooked to compete against the overrated.
Okay.
So we've all been overlooked. So give me all of the kids that have been overlooked. You know, they're going to go into a game with a different mindset than a kid that's overrated. You know, and I always tell kids, like, it's very, very interesting how brutal the game in sports can actually be, because people that are overlooked, right, they're told they're not good enough. Kids that are overrated are told that they're better than everybody else. So if you take the two sides of that, you know, a lot of times the people that are up here or believe that they're here, they haven't worked for it. It was given to them based on an opinion. But, you know, you and I, WCAC guys, you know, when we talk about basketball, it's game efficiency stats. You know what I mean? Like, when I went to the park and played, you didn't get picked up unless you had a good yesterday.
Yep.
And if you can't play, you'll stay on the side. So now you're forced to go do something else to get better so that you can get picked up. So again, being overlooked so that you can play. That's the generation I came from. Whereas kids today, they get overlooked. Then we get to parent involvement. We get to, hey, you know, do me this favor, or, you know, parents creating teams just for their kids. You know what I mean? Just so that their kids can play, or going to a team that's not that good. And that's okay, because development can come in a lot of different ways, but you can't cheat the system. Like, the process is a process, and you know, you've got to be able to have a chip on your shoulder until you're done playing.
Now, we talked about the development piece off camera one time, and you were just saying there's a drop off at different age groups, right? I think you said at age 13, size comes into play, right? And then I think 17, 18, I guess maybe the focus thing, right? And then I think I might have added in, like, when you 21, 22, right? And once you get to that level, like, do you really want to do it? Because it's real deal, you know? And then I think the last one is, you know, that first contract, you know what I mean? Like, how do you, and that's maybe at like 24, 25, right? Like, just speak on that and just kind of how you vision development.
Sure. So, you know, middle school, it's interesting, right? So, you know, that 12, 13 range, you know, that's when you begin to separate yourself, like house league, you know, park and rec. Now it's bigger tournaments. That first age group is going to determine how much longer you're going to play. So, like, kids that you started off with in house are no longer playing. Now the strong is going to survive. Now your kids with the potential are going to play.
Right.
This kid's going to be really good when he gets to high school. So now we got 2 years in middle school to get them where they need to be. And then it gets into the world that we live in now, which is reclassification, right? So now you got kids going to school that are the proper age. Then you got some kids reclassing, and now it's like uneven playing field, right? So, well, wait a minute. If he's 14 and I'm 12, but I'm in the 7th grade and he's in the 7th grade, you know, well, he's only good because, not necessarily. So you can still work to compete against that. But now size, height, strength, maturity, all of those things come into play. So now the 12-year-old, even though they're in the same grade, has to make a decision. Like, do I want to continue to compete against that? Do I want to prepare myself for that? That's where that comes in. And now when we get to 8th grade, we're talking about 15, 16, depending on who it is, or 13. You know, that summer turning 14 maybe in the 9th grade if they haven't reclassed. You're looking at a major drop off just because some kids can't mentally wrap their head around playing freshman.
Right.
Because again, they've been put on this pedestal where, you know, I'm better than everybody else. So now those kids that, you know, were overlooked, that worked a little bit harder, that may have reclassed, that may have put in the extra time, now they're ready to play against a JV kid or a varsity kid, right? You know, so the game is all about preparation, making sure you're developed properly, but also making sure that you're in a situation where you have an opportunity to get wins for whatever program you're in. Okay. So, you know, if kids can't play, if they can't compete, if they're not on a shoe team, you know, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to be at their schools, you know, competing or representing their schools. You know, you talk about college, you know, if you're not 1% of the 1% right now, you're not going to get recruited to play a Division I, you know, at a Division I school, you know, which lets you know, like the Caden Lewises, the Darren Harrises, the Ben Hammonds, the, you know, the Patrick Nagambas, like those guys, they're 1% of 1%. You know what I mean? So, you know, DMV's big. We have a tournament right now. We got 1,000 teams, 3,000 players, like, but they're not them.
Right.
You know what I mean? But everybody has the same dream, right? So, again, we talk about the fall off, the drop off, you know, just at the high school side, which is why I'm happy that we had a postgraduate program, because it gives kids another chance. So kids that aren't ready for college, that just graduated, they got a gap year, right? I can get bigger, faster, stronger. I can play, get a little bit more exposure, not just for people to see me, but for me to see basketball, right? I've only been playing, as far as schools are concerned, in a 25, 30-mile radius. Now I can get an opportunity to, you know, play against other states, you know, other regions, and be seen by other coaches that don't even come to the East Coast to recruit, and things of that nature. So, you know, I think the drop-offs, you know, from middle school to high school to college are it, you know, it's this, you know, it gets thinner and thinner. And then, you know, for the NBA, you know, we talk about the first contract. Well, you know, the key thing is can you get a second one?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because those guys that we just finished talking about that might have been younger, didn't play, they still coming. So, you know, it's interesting just to look at the numbers game and compare previous years with this year, how many people entered the draft. The numbers are very, very low, just because now everybody wants NIL, you know, collective money, whatever the case may be. You know, so they want to stay in school, which is, I think, is a great thing. You know, and it's the new day G League if you look at it, because college athletes are professional athletes the moment they get paid. You know, so you know, being in the NBA, it's good to see the new generation coming up now. You know, we're starting to see evidence of that. But, you know, a lot of the young guys that are in the league now, G League now, you know, I wish them well, but I'm not sure that they're going to be able to stick, you know, just because, you know, they came out at the right time, you know. So we'll see. It's the most competitive, you know, sport out there. So I'll give you a quick story. Tracy McGrady, Joel Hopkins is coaching at Mount Zion. I'm coaching at Riverdale Baptist. And we're down at NACA for the national championship, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Tracy's a junior. I didn't know that was Tracy. The following year, who was that?
Oh, wow.
I mean, we talking in 1 year.
Wow.
Like, just a different animal. You know what I mean? So, you know, I tell people all the time, man, like, you know, kids make a jump real quick. And some kids just make jumps bigger than others. You know, some kids, it might happen in 1 year, some it might happen in 2 or 3 years, but it will definitely happen.
Yeah.
You know.
So let's jump into the school side of this. Like,
Okay.
what would a typical day at St. James look like?
Yes. So, you know, academically, we're not your traditional school. So, in the sense of, you know, just coming into a classroom, you know, you'll have an opportunity to interact as a class, but, you know, you're individually speaking with a teacher, one-on-one, small group, and or online in live interaction, not a recorded situation. But, you know, it's every subject matter. We have so many people here to help you, but it's also preparing you for college, like teaching you how to advocate for yourself, to really focus and lock in, because that's how kids study. You know, a lot of these large study groups only happen because kids can't focus on their own. Right. So, you know, you've got student athletes in schools that go to school, or I shouldn't say student athletes, you have students that go to school all day, every day, and don't get it done, and there's no consequence. You got student athletes, you know, the expectations are higher, the day is longer, all of those types of things. So here, the concentration, 3.5, maybe 4 hours with help, you know, with your teachers, and then the rest of the day, you have an opportunity to, you know, just be in your concentrated sport, whether it be individual skill set training, wellness, strength and conditioning, or practice with your teams.
Okay. Cool.
You know, so, you know, you're constantly, you know, evolving as a player, and again, working on those weaknesses, whether it be in the weight room, whether it be on the court, whether it be with a teacher. You know, it's not just at the end of the day, traditionally, as people see. You can move, maneuver throughout the facility. But again, you can get on-demand help, you know, which I think is key to a lot of people's success. You know, just having the resources here to get the help that you need. And then, you know, instead of the class stopping, you can come into a breakout room and have private time, you know, with 2 or 3 students, one teacher, or just one teacher.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Obviously, you're going to be dealing with a lot of talent, right? At least that's the expectation,
Sure.
right? So, obviously, with that talent comes a lot of attention. You know, kids, you mentioned about college becoming like the new G League, right? You got NIL. Like, do you guys have any thoughts or setups to kind of help these kids navigate through that window?
Yes. So, you know, we're gonna make sure that, you know, we utilize all of our resources, you know, to educate the kids as much as possible. You know, again, I always go back to the fact that it's easy when you know how. And I think that this conversation last year about NIL, collective, GMs, all of those types of things, it wasn't a conversation that anybody was really comfortable talking about, because, you know, everything was still evolving, right? So, you know, I think because things are evolving, I think we have to put specialists in that space, which we'll be able to do. And yes, we want to prepare kids, you know, for everything, you know, even if they, after leaving us, going to college, or looking at, you know, hitting the transfer portal, or, you know, from a teaching component, you know, how they interact with their recruitment trips, when they're here at school and they're having to advocate, you know, with their counselor, like what school to go to, all of those. We want to make sure that they know to ask questions, they know how to get answers, they know how to reference those answers, you know, and just check the source of that, not so much just from us, but do a compare and contrast, because everybody's situation is different. So yeah, we want to prepare, you know, from an academic standpoint, but from a talent standpoint, you know, just athletes in general. I mean, you know, I think demeanor is the first thing. I'm big on that. You know, the height, size on paper, it is what it is. I think everybody that's going to walk through the door can play. You know, but, you know, again, going back to previous questions, are they coachable, right? Are they willing to listen? Do they already have a foregone conclusion on what they want and aren't going to allow themselves to be developed and to buy into this culture of what we're trying to teach? Because, you know, here the great thing is we're just trying to make sure that kids just know where they should go and what options they do have. I think a lot of times they do what this kid is doing just because that's what that kid is doing, right? Not that kid, that's good for him, but this might be good for you. So, you know, again, just having that on and off the court, I think is going to be key. But, you know, just making sure that everybody's aware of all the resources that we have. Okay.
So you guys have, was it 3 teams?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the goal. Yeah, I mean, you know, for high school, looking at national, we're looking at regional, and then we're looking at local high school teams, because, you know, any kid can get called up, right? And, you know, God forbid there's an injury or something like that, you know, but we want to prepare that third team. We want to prepare those kids for team to the regional and the national team, because recruitment is recruitment, but you got to have a pipeline. You know, why not have one that you're developing every day on your own? That's learning the culture, the school, you know, that can grow up throughout the program, and then, you know, one day see the light at the end of the tunnel and say, hey, I'm gonna be on that national team, but be here at a much younger age. You know, so now you're looking at kids coming in 1-2 years, no different than the college side. They got 1 or 2 years to adjust and adapt. Whereas you got a freshman or an 8th grader playing varsity, they're in a situation where they're able to adapt, learn, you know what I mean, and have 2 or 3 years to prepare.
Okay. So I guess, you know, you hear the what's the word I want to say? The rumors on the outside, right? And, you know, somebody will say, man, we've seen St. James before, you know, like, what would you say separates St. James from, I guess, other prep schools that have popped up in this area?
Yeah, so, you know, I think St. James, if we just look at the obvious, from a facility standpoint, from a location standpoint, it stands out immediately. You know, people don't read anymore. You know, they glance, they look at photos and websites. So, you know, because of that, if we just take the first glance, right, you just see a 450,000 square feet of a facility that doesn't exist anywhere else. When you look at prep schools, high school, it just doesn't. Now, you know, some people can compare it with the IMGs, the Spires, just because of campus life. But all of those facilities look different, right? St. James has set a different standard, just the way they're set up. And, you know, if we look at where it's located, right, even if you take an IMG, Bradenton, Florida, weather's nice, all of those types of things, can't take anything away from that. But we're in the DMV, they're in Bradenton, Florida. You know, and other schools are just in where they are. But there's no other place like the DMV. I think EYBL, there were some questions where they asked the players, you know, where's the best basketball? You know, and some of the kids were from the DMV, but some of the kids weren't. But a lot of the kids said the DMV. You know what I mean? So I think that, you know, from a consistency standpoint, I think that that's what's going to, you know, other teams have to travel hundreds of miles just to get great competition. I mean, we can build a schedule right here and play against some of the top teams in the country, and not have to spend the night, you know, or catch a flight. You know what I mean? So I think that is big, but, you know, also, you know, we can't say enough about the creative, the leadership, you know, of the 2 gentlemen that are behind, you know, the St. James. You know what I mean? Like, they saw this for us and the community and this region, and it's evolving. And, you know, we're only on this only talking about basketball, but
Right.
other sports, you know, and you know, they're very sensitive to kids going much farther than the St. James.
Mhm.
You know, I've been, you know, a part of a lot of prep scenarios. I've helped kids go to them. I've helped kids transfer out of them. And, you know, I've coached at some. I think that this scenario is just night and day as far as just resources and a team of professional coaches that specialize in their sport, and all of which have all been successful. So they have a lot of experience. And I think that when you look at schools in general, their success, but I'm not sure collectively in every sport that they have coaches that specialize in that sport. Like they may have one program that kind of runs that school. St. James is, you know, Charles Barkley wrote a book. The name of it is I Could Be Wrong, But I Doubt It. Right? So, you know, I could be wrong, but I doubt it. You know, the coaches here are very, very sharp and intentional and experienced on building, and we're all doing that.
So speaking of books, right? I just got your book, right? I'm probably like a week away from reading it.
Okay.
Like, tell us what that's about.
Yeah, so
What's the name of it too, for everybody to understand?
Beyond the Court.
Beyond the Court. Okay.
Beyond the Court.
Yeah.
And I almost slipped up and gave you the title of my second one. But yeah, Beyond the Court. So again, thanks for your support with that. Beyond the Court it's for parents, players, and coaches. And I think that triangle, if you look at it, the relationships aren't there. There's probably one of the two, but never three. Right? So, you know, we always talk about connecting the dots. And I think that all three never really get on the same page. When you do get them on the same page, you have a really successful program. And there are a lot of successful programs out there. But the reality is, for me, I wanted to do that book to talk as a player, as a coach, as a father, directly to parents that don't know how they're being viewed and or how they should approach coaches, what a good coach looks like, how to support a coach, how to support your child. Also information on how they should communicate with their child in reference to playing time and, you know, just wins, losses, where to go. You know, transfer portal, I mean, like, where would we be without transfers? Like, it's just like the common thing, but like, you can't quit though.
Right.
Like, you can't teach that in one breath and then turn right around. Now, if you have a legitimate reason for leaving, I get it, but it can't be because of adversity, because adversity is going to exist.
Build character.
Yeah, all day long. So, and then, you know, it's just mind-boggling to me that, you know, some coaches recruit guys that can't embrace adversity.
Yeah.
But you get in that game, you reap what you sow. You know what I mean? So,
That's a fact.
yeah, that's what you recruited. You know what I mean? So it is what it is.
That's a fact. So I got one more question for you, but before that, is there anything that you want to talk about that I didn't cover?
Yeah, no, I think it's just clear, like, you know, from coaches to trainers, you know, I think we all got to work together. Coaches, trainers. I was on the phone with a coach today who has a player, and he knows that the St. James would be the best situation for that kid, and he knows what his limits are, right? And I think a lot of times we're just afraid to let kids go to grow. And you know, I think that you'll see evidence of that in the book as well. Like, our players are our players, right? But that's somebody else's child.
Yeah.
So, you know, our intentions, what we think, can't go beyond, right, development, because then it gets crowded. And I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, kid got into it with his parents because this coach or this trainer, he felt that this coach and this trainer believed in him more than at home. And it's a slippery slope. It really is, because, you know, your parents are your parents, but they were making the right educational decision. But because the school that kid was looking at going to didn't have the elite basketball that the kid wanted, that he's getting and hearing all summer, right? The kid was caught in the middle. So again, I think just in the grand scheme of things, you know, we the DMV, we're stronger together. You know, you got kids from PVI that transfer and go to Gonzaga, Gordak. I couldn't be happier for the kid. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I mean, and you've seen it happen at various schools, right? The coaches, I'm starting to see more coaches come together.
Yeah.
But I'm also starting to see coaches a little bit more unforgiving if somebody isn't in alignment with them. We all have our own curriculums, our own philosophies. So again, just know that our players are watching that as well.
Right.
So again, you know, I think if we can just let the kids see us for who we are and allow just things organically to help impact them on how they should be with their friends, peers, colleagues when they grow up. You know, I think it'll be a great situation, because the power of basketball is here in the DMV, and the only way that it's not is if we get in the way.
Now, that's a great point. That's a great point. And I hope that we can continue those conversations. It starts from a conversation, you know, and then try to build upon it. So my last question I got for you is about handling success, right? A lot of people are trying to get to the mountaintop, right? But once you get there, right, and all the attention's on you and everybody's telling you how good you are, handling that success and being consistent is a different animal. You know, what advice would you give to players to handle success, or parents just to help their kids be consistent with success?
Yeah, you just have to make sure that you just teach being humble. You know, the game of basketball has a sense of humor. You know what I mean? You could be a star today based on what society says. You can be forgotten tomorrow. And, you know, you're only as good as your next game. You're only as good as your next shot. So you hit a game-winning shot, you celebrate this, that, and the third. And everybody's, you know, celebrating you. And then you miss a defensive assignment at the end of the year. You lose conference finals, whatever the case may be. Now all of a sudden, you know, you got to transfer because on nobody, you know, I mean, like, success is like, it's here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But the journey, the relationships, you know, just the hard work, the hours of commitment, you know what I mean? I think that's all you can really hold on to. You know your worth based on what you put into it. You know, people are going to, you know, want to see you, you know, they want to support you one day, and then, you know, what have you done for me lately? You know what I mean? Like, it just happens that way. You know, I've been in situations where, you know, I had some success, and then all of a sudden the level of non-appreciation, you know, it was mind-boggling. But, you know, I would tell the individual that is on that volatile slope up and down like that, like, if if they're waiting on man, speaking for men and women, to authenticate who they are, then that's where the flaw is. You know what I mean? Like you know what you're capable of doing, you know what you've done, and nobody can take that away from you. And it's the same thing educationally. When you get a degree, diploma, whatever the case may be, like you did that. Now you might go apply for a job and not get that job, but the people that were there cheering for you when you got your diploma, right? They can't boo you because you didn't get the job. You just keep plugging away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You'll get to the mountaintop, but then there'll be another mountaintop.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And you can be removed just as quickly as you got there, but you just got to keep on plugging away.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, man, this has been a pleasure.
Nah, thank you.
I
Appreciate
definitely
Yes,
wish
sir.
you much success during the
Yes, sir.
season. I hear a lot of leadership.
Nah,
You know
thank
what I mean? And I've obviously watched you on the court, very detail oriented. So I definitely think the kids will, become better from being in the program.
Yes.
So you guys make sure you guys subscribe, like, and share, and always stay game related.